Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Before I start, I want to give a great shout out to @UMCOC Nick. Thank you so much for making these really awesome bullet pointed roadmaps, kind of giving the information that's in the blog post, which is surrounded by a lot of fluff. These are amazing if you're literally just looking for the bullet versions. I will have a link to this person's Twitter in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. But because I'll be using them here, I want to give that proper reference shout out. And today I'm going to be talking about like the roadmap, why I think it's so fluffy, why I think that's okay, and kind of like my impressions of the roadmap as a whole. I wanted to do this video and this rant after all 4 posts have come out, but like it's been very clear to me just after seeing today's what I'm going to expect from the roadmap posts, and so my subject or my opinion might be subject to change, but for the most part I'm pretty confident what to expect from the next 2 posts, and that's okay with me. So that said, I want to also say that I've never thought the game was dying. I never thought the game would be dead. I've never had this impression of like, oh no, MCOC is taking a nosedive. And I know a lot of people might feel that way. Some people might feel that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's all about perspective, what you want out of the game, how much enjoyment you're getting out of the game. But I've continued to love and enjoy this game. I've also always played other games while playing this game. So if you're someone who's like been a hardcore MCOC player and MCOC is the only game you play, your situation is going to be incredibly different. Or if you have a family or kids or other responsibilities that make it harder to keep up with a game that could potentially be as time intensive as MCOC, your impressions might vary drastically from mine. But as someone who's had plenty of time to enjoy MCOC, grind tons of arena, and still play other competitive games, I've personally never felt like MCOC was any in great danger of, disappearing off of the App Store. That said, I do think there are many issues, and I think Kabam is making great strides on these issues, and a big part of that might be huge, bursts of player frustration and, some notable people commenting and making videos talking about, these changes. And I love that. I love seeing these changes. It just shows that player pressure can have an impact, or maybe this is just Kabam doing it out of goodwill. I don't think that's what it is, but I'll give them that option there at least. So that said, let me talk about the roadmap itself. So if you're not looking at this, because this is a lot of bullets, don't get me wrong, but if you're not looking at this, this is, overall just like the roadmap of the Alliance's blog post summarized in bullet form. And this is really nice and really succinct, and honestly, you could only utilize this image here and you would have a complete understanding of the blog post itself. But if I pull up the blog post, it is long. This is long, and it's notably shorter than the previous one. I can tell that they've taken the criticism of length and they've done what they can to trim it up. They've also added, information on when they expect these releases to go, etc. But still, it's still kind of lengthy, and a lot of these are, no confirmed launch windows. I'll talk about that as well. But I think this was necessary. It's a blog post. This is not a short pamphlet. People in the game have questioned Kabam. They've said, why are you doing this? What was your logic here? Hey, are you even really putting consideration and thought and effort into this? So putting in these paragraphs, what feels like fluff, has a direct value in this blog post. They are saying, hey, we are consciously thinking about these things. These were our goals and these were our intentions, and this is how it panned out. And then it comes to a question of testing or forethought or all of that, and knowledge and awareness. Those are all separate problems that definitely need to be addressed. But understanding where Kabam was heading, or the goal or intention behind these, gives a lot of perspective from a player perspective, because if you understand where Kabam is coming from, it's easier to say, okay, well then, based on your goal and your expectations of what you wanted from that content, these need to change in order to meet player satisfaction, or these frustrations are the pain points that are making your goal not possible. I think a really good way or acknowledgement of this is defense tactics. I think that it's very commonly seen that defense tactics just add or inflate the difficulty of wars, because they totally do. And Kabam is trying to match that with like attacker tactics. And then there was a lot of criticism that the attacker tactics weren't big enough. And here they openly say that they put in attacker tactics, and they intentionally went low. They knew putting the attacker tactics in as is was lowballing the value or the net value of attacker tactics. But rather than put them in too strong and then have to nerf them to balance out wars, because they do also have to consider, they don't want wars to be so easy that top tier alliances are just tying. Because if you draw alliance wars, that's a bad time for everybody. So they need to make wars tough enough that people are dying, people are losing attack bonuses in order for it to be competitive. But at the same time, they don't want it to be so incredibly hard that it's just a pisser for everybody involved. So now there's this balance. And so we do get confirmation that attacker tactics will be buffed in the future. And, this is a matter of just communicating and acknowledging, where are the goals and where's the mindset. Because the reality is, in most scenarios, at least for an online game, it's better to buff a scenario and make it more pro player than it is to nerf. We can easily see this with every single time Kabam has released a champion that was overtuned and then felt the need to nerf them. Player outrage was insane. But when Kabam talks about buffing a champion, player hype is equally insane. And the difference between those two perspectives or mentalities is the reason why we, the players, have forced Kabam to come in here really light. And there might be all other kinds of reasons for this. Maybe it's monetary profit or other that. I'm not trying to touch on those issues because those are all very real factors, but those aren't the factors I feel like we as players have control over, and this is one. We, the players, by incredibly drawing massive states of outrage from nerfing or balancing for the game, which I personally feel is totally normal in an online game, and I respect that I have a vastly different opinion than a lot of people, but by having that be the common perspective of a nerf, we force Kabam as developers to put everything into the game weaker than it could be, weaker than they might want to put it in, and then buff things accordingly. Because if they realize if they put something in too strong, they can't feasibly nerf it without drawing outrage. It's easier for them to buff it and have hype generated as a result instead. So yeah, just kind of acknowledging that. The fluff indeed is very nice. I think personally, I really enjoyed reading this blog post, but as I was reading it, I was like, I have absolutely zero desire to kind of do a first impressions and overall read on this, just because it's so much fluff. And this is where I'm going to use kind of the roadmap. So all of these short-term things, these bullet points in the short term, these are amazing. These are action items we're getting immediately or really soon. So I absolutely love these. These give us intel on Kabam's perspective and what they're doing, and all of this is really awesome. I think mostly this set of bullet points here is all that I care about. The Alliance Quest short term with the energy changes and all that jazz. Everything else, the AWAR and AQ future, all of this stuff, I have completely zero interest in. I think it's neat, redesigning and all that jazz. It's really cool, but it's so far in the future or non-disclosed information into the future that I don't care. Now, that doesn't mean that other people won't. Just because I don't care doesn't mean that it's irrelevant to the community. There are a lot of people in the game who are worried about the state of the game. They are worried about the direction of the game. And this shows players, hey, those are things that are considerations Kabam is taking into play. And by reading this, rather than fixate on the fact that there is no time late or fixate on the fact that there's a lack of information here, what we should do and what is beneficial for Kabam as well as the player base as a whole is fixate on the things we do care about. Kabam has hinted at, raids, and they said no foreseeable input or no set launch date. If we, the players, all rally behind the concept of raiding, say yes, we want raids so much more than other things that we want you to prioritize it, we see something the similar effect of variants, where variant 5 was something they were teasing for a long time, and they openly said, hey, we pushed that back because we didn't want to do it, and then player base was like, no, we really want variants, so we decided to bring up sooner and then stress the value and put resources into variant 6 sooner than we were expecting. That is the impact we as players can have. So when you're reading these blog posts or you're hearing about these updates and changes, don't think about, the negatives or the lack of timeline and all of that, because those are natural parts of a game development cycle. There's just so much effort and resources and time and energy that needs to go into actualizing these things into the game that Kabam can't reasonably do it. I personally don't hold them to that expectation of knowing when all of these things are going to launch into the game, because there's a lot of complexities there. There's bug fixing, there's programming, there's resources, cost, intensive data setting, all that stuff affects whether or not they can put them into the game at a reasonable time, whether or not that's 6 months away from now. There's also prioritization. They only have a limited quantity of resources. No matter what size that limit is, eventually they have to say, no, we have to bench that idea and do something else first. Prioritization is huge. If we, the players, say we really, really, really want to see Alliance War redesigned first, then we can stress that as a priority. But recognize that when you stress Alliance War, you also come into question other things like Act 6, right? They're working on retuning Act 6 and pushing Book 2 into content. If we say, no, we want Alliance War more than we care about story content, you can expect delays here. There's a ripple effect. That's inevitable. So what we as players need to do is also recognize what do we want, and then from there it'll be essentially just, whoever barks the loudest, or where the groups are, compiled the most. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the post overall. I know some people, myself included, have commented that maybe these roadmaps are just a way for Kabam to hype the July 4th deals, put a lot of positive impact and perspective into the game to make July 4th more successful. First off, I totally think that's true. I don't see anything wrong with that. A big part of what makes this game is its ability to generate a profit. And a big part of generating profit is having positive thoughts and positive perspectives and positive outlooks on the game. If players feel like the game isn't worth investing into, then no one's going to spend money. And then suddenly the game isn't worth investing into because they don't have resources in order to do these things. So from a Kabam perspective, they are implementing changes, and I'm sure some of these changes are faster or might even be forced changes that they necessarily didn't want. They've openly acknowledged that they didn't want to do a Cavalier difficulty. Cavalier difficulty was something they wanted to more organically introduce into the game, rather than just introduce a whole new difficulty as a whole. But I think so much player pressure was there, players threatening to leave, players actually leaving, that Kabam said, no, it's actually, even though we don't want to do this, even though we wanted to do this in a different form, we're going to have to pull the trigger, and we're going to have to push off this problem into the later, after Cavalier difficulty, whatever the next title is, and hopefully we have a solution by then. That's something they openly said in their blog, and that shows player pressure, that shows the reality of the game, but it also shows that Kabam cares about the health of the game as a whole, and I think that's incredible. And even if that is purely profit driven, there shows the fact that players will have an impact. Players will have the ability to impact which direction Kabam takes the game, even if it's only with money, even if it's only with time spent in the game or strikes or whatever caused these actions. That fact is still there, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a positive form for the game. So yeah, I think I've talked on everything here. I personally don't take this roadmap as hype for, I'm absolutely going to whale out on July 4th. I see a lot of really good changes. I love these changes to Alliance Quest. I know some people, myself included, wanted like 30-minute timers, but I think overall, even though these changes are minimal, I think it's a step in the right direction. I do personally like energy in Alliance Quest. I know a lot of people hate energy in general in Alliance Quest, but for me, as someone who has the ability to spend a lot of time in Alliance Quest, I actually enjoy being rewarded for my ability to be open and accessible all the time. Call me an otaku, call me a shut-in, call me, someone with no life, whatever, I don't care. I enjoy my games. The fact is, I like having that advantage. I like the fact that I don't have a kid to watch. I don't have a job that makes me work 16 hours a week. I have the ability to take a break and play this game at work. So I want to be rewarded for that time investment. And I think that the issue of energy in Alliance Quest, I want to just turn it on its head. I want to make the point that maybe it's not about energy, maybe it's about the fact that the lower maps, the maps that require less energy, don't provide the rewards that make it worth doing. And so there's this stressed emphasis of, oh, I have to run maps 5, 6, and 7, the higher intensive energy units, the ones where you have to log in multiple times a day, and you can't just disappear for a day, otherwise you screw over your alliance. The rewards disparity between them is so big that there's this pressure of, oh, I have to do that. And that is a different problem. I think maybe it's time we stop looking at Alliance Quest as maps 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we pressure Kabam to generate it in a sense of, so you'll have like map 7, and we as players can opt to have linked nodes, or maybe we'll have like map 7, and like that's just it. You have to be a hardcore player to do map 7. You just have the energy intensiveness. That's part of it. If you want to be part of the elite, that's fine. But maybe we see map 6 and map 4, or maybe map 5 and map 4, or, you know, higher tiered maps with less energy restrictions that are less intensive have the ability to have scaled globals or increased values on them to make them harder. We kind of are seeing this with the modifiers, right? The heroic modifiers, etc., where you could run lower tiered maps with modifiers. Maybe it's time to let people double up on the modifiers. Maybe you're like, hey, no, I really want to be able to do this all at once, so I want to be able to disappear on my alliance for a day, and as long as, you know, other people are carrying the weight, we can split the burden. So maybe I don't have to participate this day and someone else can participate another day. Maybe you can let lower tier alliances, map 4s and 5s, compete with more modifiers or more globals or more link nodes or some other form that allows them to essentially burst the content down or dedicate a smaller period of time without getting punished as much. Maybe, you know, it's not a question of energy timers in general, or maybe it's remove energy timers from map 5, right? Typically a less competitive map to begin with, a map that you're not often as energy constrained. Yes, you still run into energy constraints, it's just not as prevalent as it is in map 6 and 7. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of different potential approaches to this beyond just overall removing energy, because I think removing energy as a whole will inevitably alienate the hardcore players or the more free time intensive players like myself, and I just kind of want to give that perspective as well. And then finally, for again touching on the July 4th deals, sorry if this is cyclic, but this roadmap again doesn't impact whether or not I'll be spending on July 4th. I always look at the deals as a question of, do I feel like that's worth my money? Do I feel like I'm accelerating so much to the point where this game is going to lose interest for me? Because I do actually have a measured approach to spending. I don't spend so much money that I lose interest in the game immediately, because then it becomes not fun. So like I typically initially burst up on like rank up rewards, and then once I hit a certain threshold, I go, okay, I'm good. I don't need rank up rewards. As much as I really, really want to rank up more champions, that's also part of the reason I'm playing the game. So I start to fixate only on things that I can get with money. So if you're a spender, it's a really, really thoughtful process you need to go through and recognize. Also recognize that gacha crystals will inevitably lose their luster. They inevitably lose their shine as you build up your roster. I have an extensive roster. A big part of that is I'm a whale. And inevitably, Cavalier crystals become less and less and less enticing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just take it as a, okay, I can step back on spending, and, you know, someone else will take my place. That said, I think I've talked in circles a little bit, but it was a rant. You knew what you were coming for. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.